Well, as you get seated, my name is Napoleon Bell, and I'm the Executive Director with the City of Columbus Community Relations Commission. We'd like to welcome all of you to our commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, but then also the history of the Community Relations Commission, which has been around for 25 years. So we really appreciate you for coming for this, and I see so many friends. It's almost like a big reunion. We have people from our past commissioners to oratorical contest, civil rights tour. So we've got so many people here that have been partners with us, and we wanted to bring people together also because you have partnered with us. So we do have a full agenda. We have a very packed agenda, as you know. So we're going to be like when we're on the civil rights tour. We have a working lunch along with so much that we have going on. So we want to use every minute, though, to learn from what you hear, learn from what you hear, see, and feel today. So I appreciate your attention for the next hour and 45 minutes or so on this journey over the last 50 years of the Voting Rights Act and 25 years of the Community Relations Commission. I would like, though, we couldn't get this done without our partners and collaborations throughout the years, and so I must thank our partners in this, the Equal Business Opportunity Office, Nationwide Children's Hospital, Fifth Third Bank, the Noor Islamic Center, and Columbus State Community College for hosting this, but also the partners who really made this happen for all of us. And then we have our partner agencies that we work with throughout the years, and also for this event, the Ohio Civil Rights Commission, the King Arts Complex, and the Columbus Urban League. But again, we can't do what we do in our office without our overall supporters also that help guide us, but also support what we do. And that's truly our elected officials also. We have so many elected officials here, which is a great thing to be a part of this. But I would just like to acknowledge we have our Columbus City Council here, our Franklin County, persons from our Franklin County clerks, the House of Representatives, the state and U.S. senators are also here to have partnered with us on this particular program. So if we could, if you all could stand, all of our elected officials, please stand so we can acknowledge that your presence here, but also how you have impacted our community here in the city, but also the state and county. Our elected officials, please, if you could just stand for a moment. Thank you so much. Also, our team, our team in our office, I appreciate all the work that they've done to help put this together. Nelson, Neil, Abdi, Guadalupe, Gail, Miranda, and Toya, we really appreciate that. There's so many volunteers here that I know, one of which is the Lynches, who have worked with us, our Martin Luther King program for, I must say, 20 years or so. You've been there forever, so we appreciate that. The Lynches are right there. I also have to give a shout out to my wife. She keeps me focused. Tony over there keeps me focused, inspired, and challenged me to be the best that I can be, and so I really appreciate you, Tony. And then my mother, who is here also. I cannot forget about her, she keeps me in line, always keeps me focused also. And then I also look up to the heavens to my father, who has passed, but he continues to guide me each and every day. So at this time, as I talked, we could not get this done without our partners, and so one of our main partners here is in the home that you are in right here, and that partner is the president of Columbus State Community College, who has been, we've partnered with. He's got the MAN Initiative. He's worked with us on the Civil Rights Tour and Welcome Week and other New Americans Initiative events. So we come here and we feel as though we're home here also at Columbus State. So to welcome all of you to his home, I present President David Harrison.
Thank you, Napoleon. Good afternoon, everybody. We are delighted to have you here. It's a big deal for us to be able to host this event, and we're always delighted to partner with Napoleon and the CRC. I'm glad he had every elected official stand to be recognized. I was looking at my notes, and I saw people walking in who weren't in my notes but were elected officials, and I knew I was going to miss somebody, so thanks for taking care of that. I do want to acknowledge those, though, who I'm honored to be sitting with at my table. First of all, Representative Herschel Craig and Justice Yvette McGee Brown, Councilmember Eileen Paley, the sponsors that we have here, the Columbus Urban League and the King Arts Complex, who are great partners of Columbus State. I know we're going to hear from Ben Espy here shortly. I made the mistake of sitting between Jim Stowe and his wife Crystal, but feel free to, Jim, slide over. I understand. And again, want to give special recognition to our partner and my friend Napoleon Bell. As Napoleon mentioned, we partner with the CRC every chance we get. We feel like in many ways we've got a shared mission, and our joint vision, really we try to manifest itself together as much as we can. The Civil Rights Heritage Tour has become a really important part of Columbus State as our students participate in that each and every year. Just this morning, my assistant in my office told me that she had just signed up her and her two boys, 11 and 12, to go next summer. It's a big deal for us. Columbus State takes anniversaries seriously. We're still celebrating our 50th anniversary 2 years later, getting as much mileage out of that as we can. Last week in this room, we had a great celebration of the 25th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which I know many of you were part of that, and again, was just a great acknowledgement of progress we've made, but of the distance we still have yet to travel. And that's certainly true in the space of race and ethnicity. As a higher ed institution, and really the most diverse higher ed institution in the region, we have these kinds of conversations daily. And with the events of last year between St. Louis and Baltimore and New York, South Carolina, and then as it started to hit closer to home in Cleveland and Cincinnati, our students started those conversations. And in a couple of cases came to me and said, Dr. Harrison, we're struggling with this. What are you going to do about it? They didn't say it exactly that way, but that's the way I heard it. But we're listening. And I want to invite you into the conversation. So we're going to take this year and make these conversations a priority for the college. And starting in September, we will launch a series of courageous conversations where we're going to have certainly our faculty, staff, and students involved. But we want to make this a neighborhood conversation where we can all learn together, walk the journey together, and make sure that everyone in our community understands that they are needed, that they're necessary, and that they have a place. We will have, again, this series that will be organized around the topics of criminal justice, health and healthcare, employment, education, and housing. You'll be hearing a lot more about that, but I want to call that to your attention now as we start to get out some save-the-date opportunities. And then we're also going to take full advantage of our good friend and native son, Will Haygood. Many of you know Will. Will has a new book coming out this fall called Showdown, Thurgood Marshall and the Supreme Court Nomination That Changed America. And when Will was writing the book and its publication date, no one could have anticipated how important the release of that book is going to be in the moment in time when that book is coming to us. And Will has made it his mission, against the wishes of his publicist, to come to Columbus State Community College on October 29th. And in fact, we're going to be the only community college that Will's publicist will allow him to attend. But we're celebrating that not just as a one-day event, but really using that as part of an educational process for our entire community. So our library is in the process of putting together a gallery, an exhibition honoring the work of Thurgood Marshall and each of the cases that he argued before the U.S. Supreme Court, before his appointment as a Supreme Court Justice. The exhibition will be multimedia, highly interactive, but highly educational. We'll also present a series of lectures with our faculty and other experts and films in the library's multimedia studio on Justice Marshall and his contribution to the U.S. Supreme Court. The exhibition will open on October 1st and be open throughout the rest of the semester, when will return as our commencement speaker in December. You'll be hearing a lot more about this. We're getting publicity materials and website and those kinds of things put together, but I didn't want this opportunity to pass without calling that to your attention. We are delighted to be your partners in this conversation. We're honored to be hosting this today. Thank you and enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you so much, President Harrison. Next up, we're going to play a video. This video goes back in history, in a sense, in regards to we were able to interview some of our past chairs and past members in regards to the past 25 years of the Columbus Community Relations Commission. And feel free to, if you wish to go ahead and eat your salad, you can do that also.
CRC started just before I became a member of City Council, when there were some tensions in the neighborhoods around Columbus, some of them involving police.
The community relations was put into the Columbus Code before I became mayor, but it was not filled with individuals.
Councilman Ben Espy approached my friend Sam Gresham and myself and said, you know, we ought to have a community relations commission. We ought to bring back the commission.
Back in those days were issues of race, issues of sexual orientation, gender issues, nationality issues. All those issues were alive and well back in the 90s as they are today.
There was really no organized structure to talk, first of all, to talk about areas of mutual interest and to share concerns, and maybe more to the point, try to take action to resolve problems that we saw out there.
There was nobody to go to before that you could have reliance on, that they would get involved.
Not much communication happening, but what CRC did was try to establish avenues of communication.
So in working with City Council, I had asked both Bishop Griffin and Louis Smoot to co-chair the Community Relations Commission.
People were looking for a means. They were looking for someone who had a voice, who would speak up for them in the various communities.
I wanted to make change in the city because of things that were going on then.
I thought this was an organization that could really do a lot of good.
I saw the commission as a platform, an opportunity to bring people together, to focus on the problems of the community.
In those days, it was the same as today. Racial tension, racial inequity. I would also add to that some level of intolerance.
The docket of complaints was growing. We were beginning to see a larger immigrant community. It was just the beginning at that time of the Somali immigrants coming to Columbus.
And unfortunately at the time we did not know how to deal with them.
Who needed a little bit of help to assimilate into our culture.
Myself and a few others, we authored a guide to the new immigrants into Columbus.
I just met with a group of folks taking the class today, and they said it's still there.
One of the ones that I really remember is the issue of providing health services for same-sex partners working for the city.
Whether the city was violating the ordinance by not providing domestic partner benefits.
Well, yes, but what about heterosexual partners who are not married? And if we don't provide health care for them, we'd be discriminating against them. And there was a lot of discussion going back and forth around that issue. I think the city did finally provide healthcare services for same-sex partners and for heterosexual partners. And I was really happy to see that.
Well, if I was a commissioner today, I think I'd certainly want to focus on police community relations.
I mean, it's, you don't have to look very far. Up the road in Cleveland, obviously, they're having major issues.
Because those two streams, police and public, have to learn how to work together.
We still have tremendous issues regarding racism in our community, as every community has in this country.
Confronted with the issue of racism, which I think people do not really understand or want to confront. Some of us understand it and some of us don't.
We all have a little bit of racism in us at best. It's an issue that we all bring. We all have prejudices and preconceived ideas and thoughts, and we have to constantly be vigilant about examining our own shortcomings to understand the shortcomings in others as well.
The issue of diversity is the one that I would probably look at. We all need to look a little closer.
I think we should be focused on ensuring that all groups of people are represented in every level of life in the city.
Getting these folks together, sharing in a candid way, and working together to resolve issues seems to me still an open issue that needs to continue to be addressed.
We've always had a respect, I think, but we've also had some bad chapters that we work through constructively. I think it's good to have the Community Relations Commission in place to hear those things that might be a real problem.
And so we have to constantly be mindful of whether we have sufficient diversity, whether it's in our neighborhood, in our workplace, in our church or synagogue or mosque. We have to look around and say, is everyone just like me, and why is that?
To see the discussion about diversity, acceptance, and inclusion among existing communities who've been here a long time, and kind of our legacy communities and the new Columbus residents.
So I would see CRC's role now in really pushing, quote, integrating all the groups that are represented throughout every avenue of life in the city.
All people have the same common goal, and that is to have a better life and to be free, to move about, and to be protected.
We're all after the same thing, a quality of life for ourselves and our family, an ability to make that quality of life through employment. Those are the things that we've got to look at.
We don't have our job done yet. I think we've come a long ways, but I think it's helpful to have a Community Relations Commission that honestly looks at these issues and discredits myth and looks at the facts.
There are still issues that need to be dealt with day in, day out, and the Community Relations has a great opportunity to continue doing this and continue this legacy.
We need to continue to be a welcoming city in the city of Columbus, demonstrating to those who don't live here and live in other countries that we are a city that welcomes our diversity, we welcome immigration, we welcome new Americans. Keep with that message. Diversity is the strength of our city.
So with that, you saw some past chairs of the commission and past members. So it's my honor at this time to bring up the current chair of the Columbus Community Relations Commission, Chair Mary Howard.
Thank you, Director Bell, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to each and every one of you. We're so glad to have you here with us today. As Director Bell said, my name is Mary Howard, and for my day job, I have the honor of serving as the Administrator for Patient Care Services and Chief Nursing Officer at The Ohio State University Hospital East. But it is my extreme pleasure to have the opportunity to be a part of the CRC and the Commission, and it's certainly an honor to have this opportunity to serve as chair. I'm very excited about this twofold celebration today. the history of the CRC, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. With respect to the commission, I'd like to recognize, and Napoleon already called the names of the staff that in particular helped put together this celebration today, but I would like myself to recognize and thank the staff for their hard work and dedication to fulfill the mission of the CRC that ensures Columbus is a welcoming city. So thank you to our staff. I'd also like to take a moment to recognize my fellow commissioners who take time out of their busy schedules every day to support the work of the commission. And I'd like those of you who are here today joining us for the celebration to please stand so our friends know who you are. Thank you. And as Director Bell said, it seems somewhat like a reunion, and so it is great to see all the former commissioners here today as well. And if you would give a hand wave, or if you like to stand, please do so we can recognize you. Thank you. Now to the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It was a landmark legislation that deserves commemoration on its 50th anniversary. It widened access to the polls for Americans of color by outlawing vote-suppressing acts that were primarily used in the former Confederacy after the Civil War. The act also provided a legal avenue for court challenges of future voting restrictions, thus making it relevant today. It's a major milepost in a journey toward the more perfect union envisioned by our nation's founders. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce you to someone who I'm very proud to know, and the person who introduced me to the CRC some 10 years ago, the former director, Jim Stowe. One moment, please, Jim. Jim currently serves as a director of the Montgomery County, Maryland Office of Human Rights, and he's the 4th director of the Human Rights Office in its historic 52 years of existence. Jim wears a lot of hats, he always has. He also currently serves as a vice president of the Atlantic Region Representatives of the International Association of Official Human Rights, and he was the past president of the National Association of Human Rights Workers. We're delighted to have Jim here today to celebrate with us. Please welcome Mr. Stowe.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Now, I haven't been gone quite that long, but we used to be just a little bit better on that response. So let me try that again. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. That's what I remember. That's what I remember. And folks, I recently was with my family for a family reunion, and of course you end up hearing about things, as you know, after they happen oftentimes. And we had one of our favorite sons from my little town in Belmont, North Carolina, pass away. You may remember him. His name was Dick Williams. Dick Williams wrote the famous song, Hokey Pokey. Everybody remember Hokey Pokey in those days? Well, Dick Williams wrote that song, and we were reminiscing about him in our hometown. And so my sister Betty was sharing with me about his death. And so you always want to know who was at the funeral and so forth. And so she said, but there was one thing, though, we had, the funeral home had a little problem with Mr. Williams, you know, getting him in his casket. I said, what do you mean? She said, every time they put his right foot in, it would... Okay, those at the front can pass it back to those at the back. You'll be thinking about that the rest of the day, I promise you. Chair Howard, thank you so much for that kind introduction to members of the Community Relations Commission, to the Commission staff, to the members of the Community Relations Commission when I was here as your director. I am just so glad to see all of you, a marvelous group of folks, and thank you all so much for your continued support of this city and this commission. I served in that capacity here, was very fortunate to have done so for nearly 15 years, and so I'm just so appreciative of that opportunity, and so I bid you greetings this morning. To also, let me recognize and just say hello to members of our elected officials. I don't see the mayor here yet. I don't believe I see him, but members of council, we certainly want to say hello to you as well. And to the supporters of the commission, both past and present, and to you, the entire city of Columbus, Ohio. What a great joy and privilege it is to be here today, commemorating these two historic events, these two historic moments in time. I look back at the beginning and evolution of the Community Relations Commission and its 25th anniversary in the city of Columbus. And as mentioned earlier, the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. To Director Bell, thank you for allowing me to be part of the program today, and you gave me exactly 7 minutes, and so I'm trying my very, very best to meet that, but I have the mic in my hand, and so therefore, as we view this video, we'll all be very, very proud of how far our city has come. And to all of you who've played a role, both large and small, we salute you on this day. And thank you for your contributions. But as you have often heard, every journey begins with the first step. And while we have made significant steps in Columbus, the journey toward the future progress of our city is not complete. You see, I believe that Columbus' best days are still yet ahead. But I come today to challenge the community and the commission with a question that when heard uttered generates a sometimes casual but engaging and inquiring reaction. Who's got next? I love the game of basketball. And anytime you head to any outdoor court in the city or school gymnasium for a pickup game or the courts at the Y at Woodland Avenue, the first inquiry is who's got next? You want to get in the game. You can see who's already playing, so you want to know about the next game. You also want to know if someone else has called next, so you ask the question, who's got next? And in the context of today's occasion, the question is appropriate. As we look back and see the foot soldiers, the leaders, and those who have stood in the gap no longer stand there. Who's got next? Last week, we lost one of our community champions, a crusader for civil rights and fair treatment in the city, Mr. Amos Lynch. As I heard the news, I began to search for his funeral arrangements, and I found myself wandering down the obituary page and began to flip through and found more champions who had stepped aside. Dr. Frank Hale, Dr. Nick Nelson, Judge Robert Duncan, Ed Willis. Who's got next? Reverend G. Thomas Turner, Reverend Melvin Stewart Sr., and the list seemed to go on, but these just represent a very, very few since I left government some time ago, who've been called home by our Lord and Savior. But who got next? In order, my friends, for progressive change to take place, there must be those put in to work within the system and those to challenge the system. And so it was with the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. knew that the only effective way to ensure complete and full participation, influence, and a voice in the outcome and future of America, it was to have America make good on the constitutional guarantee of one man and one vote. So the efforts of the folks of Selma, Alabama, the Student Nonviolence Coordinating Committee, SNCC, and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, and the most important people, the everyday folks of Selma, Alabama, were critical for the success for arguably the most important legislative move and action in the history of this country. So it is with the city of Columbus. To make her the city whose best days are yet ahead, we need everyone involved. It is good to pause and to look back and celebrate the success and progress we have made, to evaluate and assess our effectiveness, to also see where our efforts may have not quite hit the mark, but to really move to a different place, to continue the progress that we fought so hard for. We also need new players to step up and choose a cause and purpose. Persons who see themselves as catalysts for change, committed to the cause of justice and equality for everyone. Who's got next? We need those who continue to always seek the truth wherever it is hidden, so that justice and fairness are common conclusions for those who are seeking the same. Who's got next? We need those who will question and analyze and critique and shake the very foundation of our belief system and status quo to ensure that all are included in the prosperity of this city, and that all the rights and responsibilities promised by this city and this state and this nation are accessible and applicable to every single person. We need those willing to take center court to become the future elected officials and public servants who will understand that legislative acts and public policy should always have at its focus the enhancement of our common humanity. And if we are true to this purpose in our decision-making, we will end this vicious cycle of constantly refighting battles already won. Who's got next? You see, it is the question of the day, and I leave you today with this. And by the way, I'm aware that there are efforts underway in the city to cultivate and to nurture the new leaders of tomorrow, and that's great. But every leader in this community who has made their mark and positive contribution ought to have identified his or her successor, to be groomed and trained to answer, to be ready to step up and step out, to move this community and this city to even a greater progress and a greater prosperity. You see, my friends, to use a biblical context for a moment, it was not David's charge or fate to build the temple in Jerusalem. It was his son Solomon. It was not Moses who entered the promised land. It was Joshua. And while David and Moses both felt they were deserving of seeing that final shining moment in their accomplishments, the goal was for the next man up. So that is why it is so important, my friends, to ensure that he or she is ready to take over and step up and take us all to the next level. Although I may have erred in my judgment, my efforts may be inadequate, my courage insufficient, I trust no one will question whether my heart and intent were submerged totally in the noble work of service to others. Who's got next? If, as community leaders and elected officials, we have as our core belief inclusiveness and service to our community and fairness, and pass these values on to the others, then, my friends, the line of those who are ready, willing, and able will indeed be long, because they stand ready to get in the game. So congratulations, Columbus Community Relations Commission, your 25 years of service and your commitment to fairness and equality in the community. And to all those who have served and given of your time and resources, we thank you. And I want to thank you personally for all of you who have so generously poured into my life. And so with that, I bid you good afternoon, and I thank you.
I got next. There you go. All right. Well, we're about to have the meal, but prior to that, we have to bring up a young man who has been part of council and is now a state house representative, but has always been a friend, but also always an advocate. When he was over the administrative committee, he was our representative and was always very engaged and with the work that we do and helped us in the work that we do. So without further ado, I'd like to bring up State Representative Herschel Craig.
Let us pray. Lord, you have been thy dwelling place for all generations, from everlasting to everlasting, thou art God. God, we first acknowledge and give thanks for your tender grace and mercy that allows the movement in our body and clarity of spirit, mind, and heart. God, we pray for all gathered here today on this auspicious occasion to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, and yes, Lord, the 25-year history of the Community Relations Commission. God, we pray that the memory and deep, profound sacrifice of those who contributed so much, especially the fallen, those who paid the full measure of their service to advance the cause of freedom, securing the right to vote so that future generations would not have to suffer the indignities of Jim Crow and bigotry manifested in the injustice and evil of poll taxes and literacy tests. We pray that their sacrifices never be forgotten, never be taken for granted. Dear God, we pray because of their sacrifices, this most fundamental, essential, sacred principle of this democracy, the right to vote, be fully realized with unimpeded access, without the fear of threat or intimidation. Further, God, we pray for wisdom, strength, and fortitude to stay engaged and vigilant to thwart the future attacks on this most crucial and precious right. Finally, God, thank you for the food for nourishment of our bodies. And we especially pray for those whose hands have prepared our bounty. And when we leave this place, but never from your presence, please keep us in your protection and loving care. Amen. I just have a very few minutes, but I certainly wanted to recognize the leadership of Director Bell. Would you please honor him again with applause, and all of the staff of this great organization. I thought about the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said this: we're all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, a single garment of destiny. What affects one indirectly or directly affects all indirectly. And I can never be all that I ought to be until you're what you ought to be. 1870, with the 15th Amendment, then with the 24th Amendment around poll taxes, allowed all of us to be here. And people like my mother who came here cleaning houses. And many of those folks for a year in Selma that would not take a bus or ride on a taxi so that we would have the right to vote. That really is the precipice, the reason that we're here today. So God bless you. Have a great lunch. I'm excited about our future, but we have great work to do. God bless you.
Okay, and as I said, as in with the Civil Rights Tour, this is going to be a working lunch. So as they plate your seats there with the lasagna and some good eats there, I want to present to you though one of the an individual who I met some time ago, but he's a poet, and he has got an incredible and moving poem that he does. And so this will take you into lunch, but it's also a very thought-provoking poem, so I want you to give you all of his attention. And as they cue it up, I believe they've got it ready. I would like to introduce, and maybe when he comes up here, he'll tell just a brief about himself. So without further ado, if Frank Brown, if you could come on up, and if you could give him a round of applause, please, Frank Brown.
Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon. It's an honor and a privilege to be here today. And my name is Frank Aaron Brown. I got next too. When we hear the words, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. Or to make it even clearer, I'm starting with the man in the mirror. James Brown and Michael Jackson knew how to bring people satisfaction, not because of how they moved physically, but how they moved in a way specifically. So how do we gain momentum to move now when the people around us are not moving, just standing? A hypothetical analogy to a modern day unintentional philosophy. There was a Geico commercial on TV. It included a man and a genie. The genie asked, "What is your wish?" The man replies, $1 million. Not only was the wish true and sincere, but instead of money, he received $1 million dear. If only he'd been more specific and deliberate, more intentional and directional, more concrete in his dream, then just maybe, just maybe, just maybe, he would have received the green. In The Rejected Stone, it states the situation is rights, not levels or degrees of discrimination or victimization. With no restrictions on innovation and modification of abomination, we can ascertain anything if we allow our minds to reach meditation. Similar to a drill sergeant focusing his speech and position of attention, and just as he calls the company to attention, company attention, we can call justice to attention for Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, Michael Brown, my own grandfather, Walter Aaron Brown, who was shot to death in his own Brown's Market store, 1 mile from here, which I refuse to ignore. MLK advocated, this is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. We progress, we use algorithms and diversity. We need to accept individuality and accept all ethnicities and personalities, people of wealth and people of poverty, and together we will morally and ethnically stand against all enormities of savageries, and all brutalities and atrocities from calamities will decline drastically, literally, expeditiously. A new peace, love, and harmony will arrive at the urgency of now. We use algorithms and diversity. We need to accept individuality and accept all genders and sexualities, all ethnicities and personalities, people of wealth and people of poverty, and together we will morally and ethnically stand against all enormities of savageries, and all brutalities and atrocities from calamities will decline drastically, literally, expeditiously. A new peace, love, and harmony will arrive at the urgency of now. We should be looking forward to the news that we can use, not the news about the abused, the urgency of now to decide, to live out his words, exceeding abundantly, not in complacency. The urgency of now to decide, to have faith, not worry. The urgency of now is the only thing standing in between those who are moving and those who are standing. Thank you.
He is definitely up. Frank Aaron Brown, remember that name, Frank Aaron Brown. All right, we are serving, so we will give you a couple minutes to start eating, and then we'll begin again with our program.
I think the part that affected me the most was the 16th Street Baptist Church, because those girls who died were around my age. And so I was thinking how sad my family would be.
To go in and see where she died, and then to go over to the museum and see the shoes that she died in, the purse that she had, and the little Bible, it was overwhelming.
I thought it was just going to be things I already knew, what I learned in school, because it was big in my old school. But when we got here, and as soon as we got to the Freedom Center, I saw a whole bunch of things and a whole bunch of people's names that I didn't know about. And it kind of hit me like, whoa, I didn't know all this.
Seeing the wreath where MLK was shot and killed, that kind of put it all into perspective to me, because I read about it in books, I saw the pictures, but I didn't really think oh yeah, well, it wasn't that bad, or but I saw the wreath and then I thought, oh my gosh.
I knew Martin Luther King, he did the march, he had his dream speech. I know as black people, we was beaten, and we would be spit on, and everybody had sit-ins, and we did different things, and people risked their lives for us so we could actually be here today, and that's amazing.
It allowed me to really reflect on my privileges and opportunities that I've had because of the work that was done by those that came before me. I'm also glad about this trip, but more so for my students. They say if you don't know where you're coming from, it's going to be very difficult to know where you're going, and I think I'm not saying that this trip is going to let them know where they're going, but hopefully it'll let them know where they should not ever go back to again.
Would you want your father, would you want your husband, would you want your wife to go out in those conditions, knowing that, if you get hit in the we got a chance to see the billy clubs that were used, those sticks look like they hurt. And if anybody's ever had a fall, I've had a fall before and had a slight concussion just from having a fall, let alone getting hit, upside the head and, losing your hearing, etc. So when I think about that, I think about our attitudes. And let me make an I statement. I think about my attitude toward life and education and what it takes to persevere and have tenacity.
I think of the people in my life that I love, that just because they're a different color, I wouldn't be able to have them. And it's something that I guess I've read about, but going through each of these museums and seeing each of these monuments and learning about these people that fought just not for black people, but for people, only because it was the right thing to do. It made me feel weak, because I, like Queen said, don't know if I would be able to be that strong. To march down a street knowing that I was going to probably get beat, knowing that I was probably going to die, and see it right there in front of me.
I could barely get off the bus. It was so moving that I was actually standing at the places where those kids, with all their bravery, decided that they would take over from the adults and make the movement happen.
Martin Luther King was 23 years old when he was in Montgomery, Alabama for the bus boycott. He was just 23 years old. And all the rest of those guys in their 20s and teens and 14s and hoses were on them. They were your age. And it's up to you to determine, what are we going to do now?
I've learned some things that I lived through. I lived through
the movement, but I wasn't paying attention. I was a teenager like a lot of you, and I wasn't paying attention. I was seeing on the news, but I didn't know the weight of it.
I'm gonna say, wow, what an experience. What an opportunity. My father's name is on the sheet. She printed this out. The joy and the honor to be the son of a Tuskegee Airman.
I didn't know that racism still existed. I've had people say that to me. So there is work to be done.
Although on the surface it seems like civil rights is a conquered thing, it's really not. The mindset and the root cause of that is still in existence, and so that's something that I've taken away, is just like what I can do to prevent myself and prevent others around me from experiencing those feelings, and what I can do day to day to make the world a better place.
Talking to my parents about this trip, I told them that we just had so many different people, so many different ages, and I feel that we've learned a lot from each other because of that, and that it was so open to different people, different backgrounds. So I'm very fortunate to be in this setting.
As I stand up here now and I look at your faces, I think about a time where we wouldn't be friends. And it breaks my heart.
We do have greetings from Washington. I knew that'd get your attention. And I was going to say the President of the United States, but we have greetings from both Senator Sherrod Brown and Congresswoman Joyce Beatty.
Hi, I'm Sherrod Brown. It's a privilege to serve as your United States Senator. Thank you to Executive Director Napoleon Bell II and everyone at the Columbus Community Relations Commission for putting together this event. Your work makes Columbus a welcoming city for individuals and families of diverse backgrounds. I want to thank Senator Ben Espy for taking the time to speak today. About a year and a half ago in January, in a cold Cleveland morning, I was at a Martin Luther King breakfast, and a pastor speaking there said something that we all know but need to think more about. He said, your life expectancy is connected to your zip code. Your life expectancy is connected to your zip code. Whether you grow up in Columbus, east side of Columbus, whether you grow up in Bexley, whether you grow up in Appalachia, wherever you grow up, in a city, a small town, a suburb, your zip code often determines whether you have access to health care, to good education, to the social support necessary to succeed. That's why the work that CRC is doing is so important. You work to ensure that no matter someone's zip code, that all Columbus residents have that opportunity to succeed. One of the simplest ways we make sure that all voices are heard in our communities is by voting. This year we celebrate the 50th anniversary of one of the most important civil rights victories, the passage of the Voting Rights Act. As we know, just a year before that, the Civil Rights Act passed. Earlier this year, we commemorated another 50th anniversary marking marking Bloody Sunday, the March to 1965 March in Selma that spurred our nation to pass that law. I was honored to co-chair and to work with John Lewis to lead a delegation of 90 members of Congress to this bipartisan congressional delegation in Selma. John Lewis told a story. I was riding on the plane with him, and he said to me, let me tell you about, because I'd heard about this speech, he said, let me tell you about my graduation speech. And John had spoken to, of all places, the graduation at the University of Mississippi in Oxford. Imagine when John Lewis was 23 when he spoke at the March on Washington with Dr. King, that he ever would have thought he might be speaking at the University of Mississippi commencement. Or imagine when John was a freedom rider in 1961, or imagine when he marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. But here's the story he told. He said, when I was a kid, I went into town from my little chicken farm where a family lived in Troy, Alabama, the small town nearby. And I said to my parents, I said, Mom, Dad, what is this? I see these signs that say whites only, coloreds only. What does this mean? His parents said, John, don't ask questions. Just don't ask questions. And so he said, don't ask questions, don't make trouble. So he said, I turned to my grandparents. I said, what is this? It says colored only drinking fountain, whites only drinking fountain. What does this mean? And his grandparents said, John, don't ask questions, don't make trouble. John says, then when I was 17 in 1957, I met Rosa Parks. And then when I was 18 in 1958, I met Dr. Martin Luther King. And I told them that story, and they said, no, John, ask questions, get in the way, make trouble, challenge the status quo, make good, necessary trouble. And that's what all of you do that are trying to move this world forward, is ask tough questions, make trouble, make good, necessary trouble. It means exercising the right to vote, the right the heroes of the civil rights movement were beaten and jailed for. But don't stop there. Get into good, necessary trouble. We know that there is still so much work to be done. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Congresswoman Joyce Beatty. I am so proud to represent you and the 3rd Congressional District of Ohio. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person today because I'm in Washington. Napoleon Bell, I want to thank you, your board, your staff, your entire team for putting this luncheon on today, commemorating the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act. I am sure Ben Espy will deliver a thought-provoking keynote address. Ben, thank you for being my friend and for all the work you've done over the years. To my colleagues, community leaders, and friends, like you, I am sure we know that we must continue to keep today's dialogue in the forefront, not only in Ohio, but across the nation. When I think of our rich history and how hard we have fought, it reminds me of our fighting and standing up for those individuals in Ferguson. Or when I walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge with Congressman John Lewis and President Barack Obama, or sat with the heartbroken community in South Carolina, it reminded me that we still have a lot of work to do. So again, thank you for being there today. Know that I am fighting for you in Washington, and that is why I have co-sponsored the Voting Rights Advancement Act of 2015 with 70 of my bipartisan colleagues. So today, not only do I say thank you, I say let us remember the words of Martin Luther King. An injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Enjoy your luncheon. Godspeed.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker actually needs no introduction, but I do have the pleasure of introducing him, and he has been a person of integrity, a person who has made a difference in our community for so many years. Our President of City Council, President Andrew Ginther.
Good afternoon, and what a great day to celebrate a critical part of our American history. A moment and a period in time when we realized a more perfect union. It's an honor to be with you here today to celebrate two important facets of our lives that help protect Columbus residents and their rights. 50 years ago in the Capitol Rotunda, Dr. King witnessed President Lyndon Johnson sign landmark legislation. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 is to the civil rights movement what the Declaration of Independence was to our nation's founding fathers and mothers. It was a defining moment in American history. It made crystal clear that the belief that all Americans, regardless of their skin color, have a fundamental right to participate in the democratic progress by casting a vote. The Voting Rights Act gave millions of people a powerful voice. I have always equated the ability to vote with your voice, and how critically important it is for this community and our culture and our country to ensure that all voices are heard. A voice that all too many in this country and state seem all too willing to take for granted. In other parts of the world, people endure unimaginable hardship just to cast a vote. But here in Ohio, we struggle to get a decent fraction of the public to participate in the electoral process. It's a sad commentary on our society and a disturbing trend that we all need to reverse. Because if our system of government is going to be successful, it depends on the participation of all its citizens. As Abraham Lincoln said, we have government of the people, by the people, for the people. I can think of no better way to honor the life and legacy of Dr. King and uphold the ideals of the Voting Rights Act than to participate in our democracy and make our community a better place for all people. Making our community better for all is the goal of the Community Relations Commission. The CRC was founded 25 years ago to bring civic leaders and business leaders, citizens and elected officials together to discuss issues of ethnic, racial, and cultural diversity. Director Bell and his staff work tirelessly to promote inclusion and make Columbus a welcoming community, and we are a better city for that. One of the few major cities in America that continue to grow in both population and development and economic security. Because like voting rights, human and civil rights cannot be for some, they must be for all. Whether you were born here or halfway around the world, you are part of our city and part of our community. I want to acknowledge President Harrison of Columbus State Community College, Columbus's community college, for hosting us here today. And I know my colleagues, Councilmember Tyson, Councilmember Klein, Councilmember Page, Councilmember Hardin, and our chair of the Administration Committee who works with the Community Relations Commission, Councilmember Eileen Paley, are all here to show our support for the great work of the CRC and all of you. Our work is not done, and in some respects it has never been more challenging. The stakes have never been higher. What does our government look like? What does it focus on? What does it invest in? Are all questions we collectively need to answer. And I can't think of any better person to speak to some of those issues than the person that I'm going to introduce next. She has been a dynamic force contributing to our great community for decades. Across the community as a member of the judiciary, an incredible advocate for children and families. And many of you know that I grew up in a family with nearly 47, over 47 foster brothers and sisters, and my older sister's adopted. Now, we didn't have all those kids at the same time, otherwise we would have had an entire block. But Judge Yvette McGee Brown has been an incredible advocate for those foster brothers and sisters of mine that oftentimes had nobody else looking out for them, coming out of situations of abuse and neglect, left behind, disregarded, overlooked. And Judge ultimately Justice Yvette McGree Brown has been focused on and devoted to children and families throughout her entire career. And so I am so honored to introduce to you the first African-American female member of the Ohio Supreme Court, Justice Yvette McGree Brown.
Good afternoon. It is really a pleasure to be here with you, and I want to echo what President Ginther said to Dr. Harrison. My mother got her first college degree here. She went to college with 3 kids, no husband, 2 jobs, and got her college degree starting at Columbus State, then at Franklin, when I was in my 2nd year of law school. So I know the power of this institution in terms of changing lives. And what I just want to say to you for a couple of minutes is this. As we celebrate the 50th anniversary, we all have to remember that it happened in most of our lifetimes. 2/3 of this room is over 50, and therein may lie the problem, because we all benefited directly from the Voting Rights Act. And I say that therein lies the problem for this. I went to Columbus City Schools, and I was the first graduating class, the first graduating year after Judge Duncan declared that our schools were segregated. So when I was in middle school and high school, I had a half day of education. I went to middle school from 1 to 6 in the evening, and I went to high school from 7:30 to 12:30 in the same building. And when Judge Duncan in 1977 declared that the Columbus City Schools were segregated, and we started this path of busing that led pretty much to the decimation, quite honestly, of the Columbus City Schools, many of us remembered and were not happy about having to change schools and didn't understand as teenagers why that was necessary. I say that to you to say this. If we don't start turning out young people to vote, everything that has happened in the past 50 years will be for naught. To have young people think that voting doesn't matter to them, to have politicians go out and cajole and beg people to vote, to have to explain to people the importance of who sits on your bench, who sits in your city hall, who your mayor and who your other elected officials is, that is a travesty for the people like John Lewis and others who bled and died for our right to vote. And so I'm going to say to you today that when you leave here, let's not just say this was a great 50th anniversary luncheon, but think about who you're taking with you to the polls. Think about who you're talking to about voting. My grandmother didn't get to vote until she was a middle-aged woman. She was from Macon, Georgia. And when she got the right to vote, she told us, I don't care if it's snowing, if it's sleeting, if you have to walk, you go to the polls and vote. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the message that has to be delivered. Think about this. Everything we've seen this year. I just heard last night a young woman say how heavy her heart is with all of the black lives that are being taken. And in Ferguson, with that very visible murder, in Ferguson, only 30% of people turned out to vote last time. After the murder, when 80% of Ferguson is African American and every elected official is white, after seeing somebody gunned down in the street, people are still so disconnected, so unattached, so feeling of powerless that 30% of people turned out to vote. That has to change. And so what you've heard today consistently is if we're going to honor this legacy, make sure that we get our young people to vote. Get them in these rooms. Who's got next? Nobody if we don't start to vote. Thank you.
You know, if your blood just doesn't start to, you know, I'm ready. I'm getting in the game. I'm ready. I am ready. But I think that's why we are here, the Community Relations Commission. That's why we're here, to keep everyone engaged and get out the vote and others. Next up, we want to make sure that our next speaker, rather, is our council member, as I say, because she is the one that is the committee chair for the administration committee and also puts us to task. Let me just say that. and I enjoy every minute of it because she is engaged in what we do and cares honestly and truthfully about what happens in the community and what's the best for the community. So I would like to bring up Councilmember Eileen Paley.
We'll talk later, Napoleon. Thank you. When I speak before other groups, this is normally bringing greetings from Council President Ginther and my other council members, but I'm happy to say today that they're all here, so I don't have to bring greetings from them. As Council Chair of the Community Relations Commission, I have the great honor and privilege to introduce my friend and legal colleague, the Honorable Ben Espy. As I was preparing my introduction of Ben today, I had great difficulty. The difficulty arose from exactly how do I communicate his greatness, his warmth, the essence of who he really is, and besides that, everyone in the room already knows him, right? In your program, you have a bio, why it's well written and it hits the highlights of Ben's incredible career. I don't think it tells you enough about Ben as a man. I have known Ben for quite some time. I had to stop for a minute and to think about when I met Ben. I think it was in the early 1990s. You would have known him too. If you would have known him too back in the 1990s when I first started in politics, he was that face that looked at you and believed in you. He was that person that made a difference in this city and this world. And he was one of those people that got me going. So when I asked Ben when he walked in today, are you going to be mad at me for suggesting that you did this talk? He kind of said, well, I'll let you know later. He had a larger than life presence in my life. And ever since then, I've moved forward. And don't worry, Ben, this is not going to be a roast on you. I know what a respected and esteemed attorney you are. Everyone who takes the time to know him learns quickly about his secret weapon, Kathy, his wife. Kathy works tirelessly behind the scenes with many groups and individuals, and she is a major contributor to the greatness of this city and of Columbus. Anyway, back to Ben. Although behind every great man is a better woman, I just have to say that, Ben. He has served as Columbus City Council member for over 10 years and subsequently as the Ohio Senator for 8 years, several of those as minority leader. I love these words from the Akron Beacon Journal when they endorsed Ben for his race for the Ohio Supreme Court. I quote, "Many Ohioans may recall Ben's tenure in the State House, representing Columbus in the Senate for a decade, ending in 2002. He served as the minority leader, his legal expertise on school funding elevating an often rancorous debate. Espy also served for a decade on the Columbus City Council. His political experience combined with his high intelligence and steady temperament would benefit the High Court. This is hardly the sum of Espy's resume. His legal career began with Allegheny Airlines as an assistant corporate counsel. He served as a judge advocate in the U.S. Air Force. He worked in the State Attorney General's office in the Civil Rights section as the head of the Division of Criminal Activities, and his private practice has run essentially parallel to his political career. Espy has represented public employee unions in many instances, and that may invite some to pigeonhole the then candidate. Don't be so quick to assess. Espy, then 52, believed that the court should be accessible to all. He also grasped the limits of the law. What an endorsement from the Akron Beacon Journal. I want to end with letting you know, as we celebrate this important 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, the very group hosting this luncheon exists because of Ben. He helped the legislation creating the Community Relations Commission and was done so by ordinance written and sponsored by Ben Espy. Ladies and gentlemen, I present my friend, our keynote speaker, Ben Espy.
Thank you, Eileen. First of all, let me say it's good to see everybody here today. This is like a homecoming week for me because a lot of people I haven't seen in years, and I wonder if they were still around. But it's great to see everybody. I mentioned a couple people who are here today that I've known for years. As a matter of fact, Reverend Troy was my minister when I was in grade school. Back in Sandusky, Ohio. And it's good to see Alan Katchen, who introduced this legislation back in 1990 with me. Alan's always been a close friend, dear friend, with the Jewish Defamation League. And so it's good to see you again, Alan, too. But also everyone else who I haven't seen for a while, just want to say hello. And I've enjoyed all the speakers this afternoon, all their comments, and they left me 10 minutes to speak. So I will not go that much longer. But I did want to share with you probably my thinking on this whole issue, the Community Relations Commission. When we first decided to do this concept in 1990, our goal was to make sure there was a forum that people could come to and air their differences and learn about other people and their cultures, and to make sure that any disputes were going to be discussed and remedied through discussion. And I read the history of the CRC, and you've done so much more than that over the years. And I think through the leadership of Mr. Stowe and, of course, Napoleon Bell now, you're doing a lot more things than I anticipated that ever happened with this organization. I think 25 years ago, we wouldn't have this many people in the same room. But it was an idea that when I went into public service in 1982, my goal was to make a difference. And I think the big difference was the fact that I went into elected service at a time that you felt that you were doing public service, as opposed to today, a lot of people go into public service because they need a job. And so when you go into public service because you want to change things because of the public nature of what you're doing, it's a lot easier because you didn't have to vote for job protection every time you voted. You could care less. All you wanted to do was serve. But then going back years when I was raised in Sandusky, Ohio, as a young man, I was born in the South, in Tennessee. But I had parents who brought me to Sandusky when I was a year old. And they had just left the South trying to find work. And they went north. They didn't know where they were going, they just went north. And they stopped when they got to Lake Erie. And if they could swim, I probably could be Canadian right now. But they stopped in Sandusky and got a job. My father got a job in a steel plant. But they told me all these stories about the South and what they had to endure. And I've always been kind of a precocious kid. I always wanted to know more and more what happened, why they do this. And that's why I'm impatient with life. I am so impatient with change. And so she told me, her mother told me a lot of things about what she had to endure in growing up in the South, in Tennessee. And she told me how she had to go shopping and they wouldn't let her try the clothes on. Or she wanted to try a hat on, she had to put wax paper on her head first. And all the things that he had to do and go through just to live in the South. And so when I started going through this process of growing up in the North, I had no idea that these things even happened in the South, except through my parents. Because the North had a way of disguising the segregation that we went through. We went to school with white kids, We did all those kind of things, but we read about the South, how bad it was, but I didn't have to experience that until I went to college at Ohio State. At Ohio State in 1963, I was a member of the track team, and we drove a panel truck to Florida to run track meet at the Florida Relays. And we rode down a panel truck, and we had 4 white team members and 2 blacks. And we went down through Macon, Georgia, drove through in the spring quarter, and I wonder why I couldn't find a place to eat. No one would serve the 2 black members of the track team. And so we just had to keep riding until my teammates, the white teammates, brought us food outside. My first experience of what it was in the South and what it was like, and I still couldn't believe this was happening to me just because of skin color. Very, very naive in terms of what was going on. But I came back and I looked at my Ohio State football team, which is another interesting thing I learned too. In 1961, when I was recruited to play football at Ohio State, I look back now and I noticed what the impact that they had about the racial prejudice, but it was a culture. They only recruited, the year I played, only 5 black players. Only 5 black players came to Ohio State in 1961. And today, if they get less than 20, it's a failed season, failed recruiting season. And then I wondered why we only had no more than 3 players, black players, starting at one time on the defense and on the offense. Subtle things you don't pick up when you're growing up. And so when I went through all these years of trying to understand these nuances of racism, it hit me very hard once I realized what I've missed all these years trying to change. I'm a big follower of the civil rights movement. I'm a big follower of Dr. King. By a show of hands, how many people saw Selma? Okay, most people in the room saw Selma. Selma was the culmination of the struggle. We look upon that as the beginning, a lot of us. The Pettus Bridge and all that, the movie, then after that, everything started to happen. But before that, 100 years before that, when we didn't have any voting rights at all, is when we first started to learn how this journey was bloody, it was harsh, and turned a lot of people off just even trying to participate, period. Why do we think so many older people marched in Selma? The ones who were in their 70s and 80s, they marched because they're trying to protect a generation of people behind them. And so when we sing, "We shall overcome," the new mantra now is Black Lives Matter. And I predict that's going to be the new slogan in future years, Black Lives Matter. Because "we shall overcome" is something that we grew up with, but we found out we sing that song every year. Every year. And we were still overcoming my whole life. And here I am now at an age that I'm still singing it. And my kids don't understand why it's important to sing that song. But Black Lives Matter now is a new mantra. But I wonder, when I looked at this topic for today, the Voting Rights Act of '65, this could be a very short speech by saying the Voting Rights Act of '65 was a culmination of all these years of denying people the right to vote. When people recognized how important it was to vote, that voting controlled and voting itself was all the power you needed to change things. And so black people throughout the years knew that voting was the key to change. Regardless of what condition you were in, if you could vote, you could put people in office that could maybe relate to what you were doing and trying to talk about. But let's go back 100 years before the Voting Rights Act of '65. Let's go back 100 years before that and see how all this started. In 1965, of course, we just come out of the Civil War. And after the Civil War was over, of course, the Confederacy was divided. And all the southern states, they were trying to protect one thing, and that was the fact that they wanted to make sure that their stable of black people they had was going to continue the same involuntary servitude that they were going to be, continue the same voluntary servitude. They've been there for years. And so the Confederacy was divided between all the southern states and all the northern states. And so that's why I look today and talk about this Confederate flag. And everybody talks about it represents history. Well, the Confederate flag represents a way of life that they want to maintain, and that's to have black people work for nothing, not vote, not be able to vote, not be able to get an education in school, to keep them dumb, and to keep them peasants. And so that was what the struggle was about after the Civil War. Now, fortunately, after the Civil War happened, the big challenge then was to how do we get these federal states back into the Confederacy, back into the nation, if they change their ways. And there are many things they tried to do to get them to change their ways, but the Confederate states was dead set on the fact they want to make sure that black people was going to keep disenfranchised through not voting. So the federal government put all these federal troops in all the federal states for the next 10 years. They had federal troops to make sure they would try and make them act right. And so when it was signed in 1965, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated 5 days after it was signed. And once he was assassinated, we then got President Andrew Johnson, who was then the vice president. And of course, he was a president who would not want to do very much. And he let the southern states do what they wanted to do, basically. And the southern states, in reaction to this new energy they got from the federal government through Andrew Johnson, said, okay, we're going to pass something called the Black Codes. And the Black Codes was to make sure, again, that the black community would stay in their place. Now, the Black Codes, of course, were passed to make sure that the freedmen would stay in their place. They limited property ownership. It banned ownership of blacks for firearms. They couldn't serve on jury duty. They couldn't give court testimony. They imposed penalties of fines, imprisonment for vagrancy, for not working. And so all these laws had the effect of what we see today, which Michelle calls the new Jim Crow, the starting of putting all blacks in prisons for any little incident you can think of. Again, to make sure that they would not participate in this America. And of course, then they could not participate because they came out of prison, they passed laws which says felons can't vote. So this whole thing about America was based on the fact that if we can stop them from voting, we will maintain our power throughout all these years. If we can stop them from voting. So the fight has been for the last 100 years before 1965 was to deny black people the right to vote. They knew where the power was. Now, a lot of things happened over the next 100 years, which I think helped us quite a bit. But we didn't get very much help from the federal government because if you remember, there was a case called Plessy versus Ferguson, which came out and says separate but equal facilities is constitutional. That if you keep separate facilities between blacks and whites, There's nothing wrong with that. That's how U.S. Supreme Court said that. So it gave the Southern rights people more impetus to say, we don't need to do anything for these people. So that's been the uphill fight all these years, just trying to make sure that we had the right to vote. And so Selma was just a culmination of all these frustrations over the last 100 years of trying to get a right to vote. And so when they marched across the bridge, and people saw this now on TV, and when President Johnson saw this on TV, and when Dr. King got involved in the second march, then people say, why are we treating these people this way? Just because they want to vote. And that's when the things went into operation, when President Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act of '65, and we saw some glimmer of hope. And the Voting Rights Act says you cannot deny people to vote based upon the color of their skin, and therefore we're going to enforce it. And that's the first sign we had then we had some voting power. And I've heard other speakers talk about why we still don't vote. 30% in Ferguson, Missouri, turned out for voting. Why we still don't vote? Because we still can't connect. Our community still can't connect the power of voting with the power of laws. Because their lives don't change anymore if they vote or not. That's how they feel. Their lives don't change. So we must demonstrate to them how their lives do change. One thing we can do, which we don't do, is that everybody we see on the street who doesn't vote, how many of us take a person like that with us to the voting polls every year? Take one person, find one person, because they're not going to go on their own. They still can't see the change that's possible to do that. But the people in Selma could see the change of voting. Right after they passed the Voting Rights Act, elected officials' elections went up 75%. 75%. And so that's why it's so important for us to get involved and make sure when we pass these laws like the Voting Act of '65, that we make sure that we produce results. And I'll tell you this, in the South, since the '65, they have more elected black officials than anywhere in the country. Anywhere in the country. And so we still in the North don't feel the same kind of empathy that we should about what they've done in the South. Because the Southern individuals who've been involved in this movement for years, they know how important this Voting Rights Act is. We don't feel the impact in the South and the North as much, because we've always had a chance to vote. But this Voting Act of '65 told us, first of all, to me, that the energy that we need and the thrust we need and the power we need is in the voting, is in voting. I have 4 daughters, and I knew that growing up, each time I voted, they went with me. And I wonder how many of you take your kids voting with you and tell them why it's important to go vote, to vote. So we can keep talking about Black Lives Matter, but unless we put that into a voting stance, then that's going to be another slogan which doesn't go anywhere at all. We can make noise in the streets, we can talk about how unfair we're being treated, but until we start voting and make sure that we change the people who are governing us, nothing's ever going to change. That's the message today. I knew that this is a luncheon, going to be a longer luncheon, but I just want to get to the point across to you that the Voting Rights Act of '65 was a culmination. It wasn't the beginning. Every year, every president since Johnson has extended the Voting Rights Act every year. And now recently, of course, the Supreme Court overturned part of the Voting Rights Act by saying that we don't need to watch these states anymore because you're using data which is 40 years old. These states are trying to do good, so we're going to let them off the hook. And the Supreme Court did that. So it's a constant fight, it's a constant battle every year to make sure that we keep our footing by electing people that we know is looking out after our best benefits, our best efforts. So I want to thank all of you for coming out today. I want to thank Napoleon Bell for inviting me. I want to thank Judge McGee for being here. She didn't tell you this when she was up here, but she refers everybody to me as her father. I'm not her father, though. But her mother always says, send your daughter some money. So. But I want to thank you all for coming out. I see a lot of faces here that I know that I'm going to see again soon. Lela Boykin, my classmate from Ohio State. Grady Pettigrew, my classmate from Ohio State. But I want to thank you two for coming out today, because a lunch meeting is always tough, because by the time you get to the last speaker, it's time to go back to work. And so I'm going to stop right here and just thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me out today. And make sure you take someone to the polls with you this fall. Very important. Find someone who hasn't voted and take them with you. And therefore, you can find out your polling number is going to go up, because then they can see what it's like to vote. Thank you very much.
Okay, don't go anywhere. We're not done yet. Thank you so much. After all of this, you've got to get engaged. And that's all I continue to hear is getting engaged. And speaking of engagement, before we do wrap up, though, I was remiss. The county commissioners wanted to make sure that they were a part of this and gave a resolution and recognition. So County Commissioner Marilyn Brown, Paula Brooks, and John O'Grady have a signed resolution here as part of this program. One last thing, you know, during the Civil Rights Act, or during the Civil Rights Movement, there were so many that were involved and so many that collaborated to really move things forward. And many of those were our Jewish brothers and sisters. And so if we could, as to end this occasion, if I could have one of our commissioners, Rabbi Berman, please give us the benediction for this occasion. Rabbi Berman.
The last one up gets the last opportunity to say thank you to Napoleon for so much that's been done and so much that's been accomplished, and to Jim Stowe and to Robert Short, who recruited me into this, and to so many others who have meant so much to our community and who continue the work of making this community day by day a better place for all of us. There's a powerful quotation in the Talmud, Pirkei Avot, quotation from Rabbi Tarfon, a 2nd century sage who taught us, Lo alecha hamelacha ligmor, v'lo ata ben chorin lihibatel mimena. It's not your obligation to finish the task, but that does not free you from your obligation to do your part. It's a wonderful statement, a powerful statement. It implores each of us to be involved, even if we know we can't do everything. But as I was sitting here today, it occurred to me there's also a problem with that statement. And the statement is that once you say to someone, Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, it's not your job to finish the task, you let them off a hook that we really should see ourselves as still being on. Each of us should be involved as if we did have to finish the task. We don't even know what finishing the task really looks like, but each of us should be involved as if it was our personal obligation to see it to the end and not to give up until we really had reason to believe that the most pressing problems of our society have been solved. We may never get there, but we should work as if we could. And we should work as if each and every one of us had the obligation to see it through. May God help us and guide us, strengthen us, and give us the inspiration that makes it possible to go forward each day and to see something far better ahead for all of us, for each of us, and for the community and the nation around us. And let us say, Amen.
Okay, well, that ends it. We appreciate you coming. On behalf of the Community Relations Commission, thank you so much.